Well, across the U.S., members of Congress are back in their home states and districts talking to constituents during the August recess. In our Newsmaker interview, Dick Pryor spoke with U.S. Senator Tom Coburn about what he's hearing and what's on the agenda when lawmakers return to Washington next month.
Senator Coburn, under sequestration, automatic across-the-board budget cuts will occur on January 2nd. You call that stupid.
Sure. Why would you cut something that's effective when you have other programs that are much less effective? Why would you cut them both the same? I mean, it's a cowardly politician's answer to our problems because then they don't have to take responsibility. They can say, well, your program got cut, but everybody else got cut the same, rather than standing up and saying, here's what I think works, here's what we think doesn't work, I'm for cutting all of this, and I'm for enhancing this. So it's the typical duck, bob, and weave of a career politician.
Do you think that Congress will find a better way before January?
Well, I hope so. We have a limited amount of time, Dick, to solve our problems. The lack of adult behavior in Washington in terms of really talking about what the real problems are. The Social Security disability system will be bankrupt in 18 months. The hospital trust fund, if it's lucky, will survive till 2016. That's Medicare. Who's talking about those things? So my hope would be that there's a wake-up call, that we're held accountable to talk about the real problems in front of the country and at least exhibit some leadership and begin addressing them, regardless of the cost to the politicians, which is what's sacrosanct in Washington. Don't do anything to hurt your career, even if it hurts the country.
The deficit, of course, continues to be a huge concern. You believe that the Defense Department can be cut at least 10% without jeopardizing the military?
Absolutely. Yeah. All you have to do is just take a common sense viewpoint and look at it and actually go ask people in the military. They'll all agree with you. There's not many people who are in any position, whether it's an airman third class that's responsible for a supply depot or a commanding general of a division, when you ask them privately, take them off public record, if you had to tomorrow, could you still defend our country and eliminate 8 or 10% of your budget? They all say yes.
But you would do that through targeted cuts, not an across-the-board.
Absolutely. Across-the-board cut is stupid. It is stupid. And it's also irresponsible, because what it does, across-the-board cuts will much more likely put our capability to defend ourselves in jeopardy than selective cuts.
You and several other senators are working on legislation called the Audit the Pentagon Act. What would you like to see done there?
Well, you cannot manage what you can't measure, and the Pentagon can't manage anything effectively because they can't measure hardly anything effectively. So it's a requirement that if in fact you get audited statement, we'll give you more flexibility with how you spend your money. And it's a bipartisan bill. I think it'll grow. I think it will gain lots of control. A lot of the politicians don't want to give that kind of flexibility. In other words, if we're going to be effective managers and we actually have audited financial statements and we actually know what we're doing, why would we not want to give them, the people who actually know what they're doing, more responsibility with how they spend their money? And a lot of the career politicians say, well, that's all an appropriation matter where they can't spend anything unless we say it. Well, then you're not really allowing them to be effective leaders and managers.
You have maintained that the country should take an overall approach to reducing the deficit that can include increasing taxes. Members of your own party, some of the leadership, Grover Norquist, others, have said that that's not a good approach. But you maintain that that has to be an option, it has to be on the table.
I say it differently than you just said it. Increasing tax revenues. And you don't have to increase tax rates to increase tax revenues. What you have to do is eliminate the stupidity and the complicated nature of our tax code, where we actually, $30 billion a year to the well-heeled and well-connected in this country get benefits that are not available to the rest of us. Because they've lobbied for benefits, actual spending through the tax code. Nobody would say a thing if you eliminated it if it was over here in appropriation. But tax credits, which are actual spending, because we're actually writing a check and sending it to people, are the things that need to be eliminated.
Will that kind of an approach, raising revenue, be possible in the next 6 months?
Well, I think anything's possible. I think a lot of it depends on the outcome of the election and the realistic expectation of what the world financial situation is going to look like. We have a limited period of time to convince the world that we're actually going to address our problems, and that means compromise.
During the recess, you have been traveling the state, listening to constituents. What are you hearing most often?
Oh, lots of anxiety and worry about kind of our leaderless way. Not all that. Specific issues for specific people. A lot of constituent work that comes up in those town halls. But America's anxious, and rightly so. Actually, I think the American people, and Oklahomans in particular, actually understand where we are, much more so than the politicians in Washington. And they're willing to do hard things if they see light at the end of the tunnel, if they see real visionary leadership that says, here's the problem, let's fight on what the solution problem is, but let's quit denying the problem, and then let's work our way to where we create a future for our kids.
Senator Tom Coburn, it's always a pleasure visiting with you.
Good to be with you.
Thank you.
You bet.